Trump is going to be president in 28. Well, he's going to get a third term.
What about the 22nd Amendment?
At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is, but there's a plan, and President Trump will be the president in 28, and people just ought to get accommodated with that.
Who is Steve Bannon? Some of you probably know him from his tenure as Trump's White House chief strategist, or you know him through his conservative talk show, or you've seen him on Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, or any one of those kind of right-leaning media platforms. Or even you could have learned who he is through left-leaning platforms such as CNN, MSNBC, ABC, or even Gavin Newsom's podcast, where he was surprisingly the second guest ever.
We'll stress test that.
The purpose I want to do this is I want to convert you to be a tariff guy also. This is part of the process to unwind you from being a globalist to make you a populist nationalist. It's a long journey. It's a long journey, but I think you'll get there.
This is part of the deprogramming, is it? I appreciate it.
Who is this MAGA supporter? And why does he pop up everywhere saying unconstitutional things like we need to prepare for a Trump third term? So for me, I learned who Steve Bannon was when a 2021 trailer came out with Steve Bannon at the center of it interviewing the one and only Jeffrey Epstein.
But the future is for the way women think.
The way women think.
That's correct.
Is that not a sop because of all the depravity you've done against young women? And your new sop is that their women's thinking is the future?
The only footage we see from this trailer is wild because Epstein in 2019 is backing the Me Too movement and looking to change his image. This change in image is confirmed with the recent House Democrats releasing over 20,000 pages, including messages between Epstein and Bannon, where he was part of the, quote, Rehab Epstein's public image crew. Bannon says we must counter, quote, rapists who traffics in female children to be raped by the world's most powerful, richest men, quote, that can't be redeemed. He then goes on to say, can't redeem unredeemable. You have a lot of things which will show, but you are not that. And it gets crazier. He even goes on to say, there is a crazy jihad against you, i.e. Epstein. Both of these messages are incredibly revealing, but ultimately very strange. The planned documentary was titled Monsters, Epstein's Life Among the Global Elite. You can only imagine what was going to be disclosed, since Bannon even said he had somewhere between 15 to 16 hours of filmed interview sessions with Jeffrey Epstein during 2018 to 2019. They were prepping Epstein for a planned interview with CBS's 60 Minutes that ultimately never aired. But here we are 5 years later and nothing has come out. Bannon's been asked about releasing it several times, especially since he is the MAGA supporter. He even says Trump's a tamed MAGA. And Trump ran on the idea of releasing the Epstein files. But here's where Bannon's character leaves me with more questions than answers. Because Steve Bannon goes on all these shows and they still ask about Epstein and the files. And do you know how he responds to these? Extremely calculated. He gives you the good old coming soon or next year.
In 2019, you did an interview with Jeffrey Epstein for a documentary you're making called Monsters. That interview never came out. Would you be willing to release that footage, and why hasn't the footage been released already?
We're going to release the film, the 5-part series next year, early next year. Yeah. You're going to see it.
However, legal correspondent for Business Insider, Jacob Shamsian, who I want to credit for very solid reporting, has gotten word that people who work for Bannon on his War Room podcast have not seen any indication of footage ever being edited for this Epstein documentary. But it gets even weirder because Steve Bannon on his show and attending any live event like Turning Point USA, he never hides from the Epstein files question. In fact, he tells people to keep pursuing it because it will reveal, in his words, the cover-up.
I know, but but I'm saying it's you'll get to the cover-up of exactly what the cover-up was. Because now, by continuing to force and say, hey, maybe this is a better way, you're going to get some documents on this Epstein situation. Something's going to happen. You're going to have a special prosecutor. You're going to get documents. It's going to start unfolding because you were determined. You're not rude, or you're not unappreciative. You're sitting there going, this has to be done.
And then in late 2025, the House Democrats released 20,000 more pages of Epstein files. New photos showed Bill Clinton again, Bill Gates, Noam Chomsky, Woody Allen, Michael Jackson, and even Walter Cronkite. and among them were also photos of Steve Bannon, with one photo sparking lots of controversy since it's an alleged photo of a traffic victim, and it shows Bannon speaking to Epstein, most likely about his rebranding public perception. That alleged photo also confirms what close sources have suggested about Epstein, that Epstein kept trophies of his victim around his home, like the famous Bill Clinton address found in Epstein's New York townhouse. Which then begs the question, why is one of the most famous conservative faces in the 21st century trying to help rebrand Epstein's image? What's in it for him? Why has no one asked him about his ties to Epstein publicly? And why on earth is Steve Bannon holding on to an alleged 15 hours of footage and not releasing it? Well, today, we sift through the interviews, the documents, the timelines, and really figure out who Steve Bannon really is and why he appears everywhere with everyone, like Epstein. Because if there's one thing we're gonna learn, Steve Bannon is the master of redirection. So if you saw last week, we dropped a 40-minute documentary on Gavin Newsom. So this week, I decided to split the difference and do it on a conservative who seems to also have aspirations now for running for president. So if you haven't already, please like, comment, subscribe. We are on the road to 100,000 subscribers. Now let's get into this. Okay, so let's set the deck here and rewind the tape on the life and story of Stephen Kevin Bannon. So Bannon grew up in a working class family in Richmond, Virginia on November 27th, 1953. He was born in the 50s, so Bannon grew up with a father who was a telephone company lineman. And here is a funny twist. His father was a staunch supporter of John F. Kennedy, the Democrat. He would go knock on doors for his campaign and was said to have connected with the Irish Catholic overlap. So Bannon went to an all-boys Catholic military academy in high school before he would then attend Virginia Tech. Now, this is where the image of Bannon really starts to develop, and he builds his core beliefs here. Before he was even 20, Bannon ran for student government under anti-establishment ideas, and he won by a landslide. He then joined the Navy as an officer between 1977 and 1983, because according to close friends, this was a stepping stone to get into politics. On the USS Foster in the Gulf of Oman, apparently this is where Bannon swung hard to the conservative side. He was deployed to the Persian Gulf for Operation Eagle Claw, which was in regards to the Iranian hostage crisis. The failure of the mission is where Bannon's political aspirations really began. In 2015, he said, "I wasn't political until I got into the service and saw how badly Jimmy Carter things up. I became a huge Reagan admirer, still am, but what turned me against the whole establishment was coming back from running companies in Asia in 2008 and seeing that George W. Bush had effed up as badly as Carter. The whole country was a disaster." Bannon's resume is one of the most decorated out there, there's no question, because during his time at the Navy, he worked as a special assistant to the Chief of Naval Operations at the Pentagon. And at night, he would be attending school at Georgetown University, where he obtained a master's degree in national security studies. But after 7 years with the Navy, he moved on and got further education, where he attended Harvard Business School, which has nothing to do with politics, but he then got a job in business at Goldman Sachs as an investment banker. So we go from politics to military to politics degree, and then he decides to go to the business route. He's touching all facets of careers, it seems. So before Steve Bannon ever touched politics, before Breitbart, before Trump, he was already playing the game, as you can tell. Wall Street to Hollywood, and then in 1990, Bannon left Goldman Sachs, where he had climbed to the level of vice president and launched a boutique investment bank called Bannon and Company with a group of former Goldman colleagues. This wasn't random though. Bannon had been sent west by Goldman Sachs years earlier to help expand the firm's presence in Beverly Hills, right where I guess finance, entertainment, and influence quietly overlap. Bannon and his company accepted equity stakes instead of cash in several projects under Castle Rock Entertainment banner. One of those projects was Seinfeld. At the time, the show was only in its third season, successful, but nowhere near the cultural monster it had become. Bannon later said they ran the numbers assuming modest syndication. "We were wrong by a factor of 5, he's quoted. They weren't just wrong, they were wildly wrong. By 2013, the Financial Times reported that Seinfeld had generated $3.1 billion in reruns alone. Even a 1% stake would mean over $30 million. That's just from one show. That single deal meant Bannon was financially secure for life. Deep in Hollywood throughout the 1990s, Bannon wasn't a political figure at all. He was fully embedded in Hollywood, and he produced and worked on around 18 films, including The Indian Runner in 1991, directed by Sean Penn, Titus in 1999, a Shakespeare adaptation, and by the early 2000s, Bannon went even deeper, becoming a partner at The Firm, a major talent management company representing A-list actors and directors. This was just wild because he had been politics, military politics, business, and now Hollywood. And here's where it gets interesting. People who worked with Bannon in the 90s describe him almost the same way again and again. Extremely intense, intellectually aggressive, not warm or social, obsessed with history, power collapse, and decline. He wasn't a Hollywood party guy as you would imagine. He didn't chase fame. He didn't care about celebrity. Instead, he was the guy in the corner drinking, arguing, talking about the fall of Rome, rambling about corruption and the elites, and obsessed with cycles of history. And now, years later, you guys probably saw in 2018, Sean Penn went on Conan and called Bannon a crook then and a crook now. But the context matters. This was during the peak of Trump-era Hollywood backlash. Anyone tied to Trump was pretty much ostracized. It was extremely radioactive. That's Penn's opinion. He didn't like him, and I think a lot of it had to do politically. Behind the scenes though, while Bannon's career was thriving, his personal life was less stable. What we know, and this is an area I'm only gonna touch on briefly, by the 1990s, his first marriage had already ended quietly. His second marriage, which produced a daughter, ended in the late 90s, and his third marriage to former investment banker Diane Alessi ended bitterly, involving disputes over money and custody. So while Bannon was financially set and professionally climbing the ladder and going into all these facets, his personal life was a little bit messy and strained. And so why does the 90s matter? This decade explains everything that comes later. Because by the end of the 1990s, Steve Bannon had a ton of money, complete financial independence, and he had deep experience and connections with so many people. The man you would see later, the strategist, the disruptor, the ideologue, was already there. But it wouldn't be until 2004 that Bannon's true colors would finally make it on the big screen. So in 2004, Bannon made a documentary about Ronald Reagan called In the Face of Evil, one of his true admirers. While he was making the film and showing it around, he crossed paths with conservative writer Peter Schweizer and publisher Andrew Breitbart. That meeting turned out to be important. Breitbart later joked that Bannon was like the, quote, Leni Riefenstahl of the Tea Party, basically saying he was really good at using film media to push a political agenda.
Alarmed by September 11th, Bannon produced a film about his hero, Ronald Reagan.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
The first word that leaps to mind is apocalyptic. He has a very alarmist, urgent filmmaking style. The tone is febrile. The visual style is lurid.
Bannon's film identifies a dark threat he calls the Beast.
After that, Bannon leaned hard into political documentaries. He helped finance and produce films like Fire from the Heartland, The Undefeated, and Occupy Unmasked. These weren't Hollywood passion projects anymore. They were full-blown political weapons, meant to fire people up and shape how conservatives saw the world. Julia Jones, one of the co-writers of In the Face of Evil, has said Bannon wanted the threat to be known as the Beast. That is what he described it. The film praises Reagan, but what's most fascinating is the ending. The narrator states the Beast is still alive, and the videos of 9/11 and Muslims praying are who he's targeting, clearly establishing the Beast is. What almost made me fall out of my chair when researching Steve Bannon is learning how the book, The Fourth Turning, was one of his favorites. Now, if you watch Julian Dory's podcast, you know Julian references this book all the time because it proposes that American history moves in cycles of roughly 80 to 100 years, each composed of 4 turnings. There's an awakening, cultural upheaval, an unraveling, individualism, institutional decline, and a crisis, a major societal turning point. That crisis looks like a revolution, civil war, or Great Depression. He even makes a documentary on it suggesting a destruction of the establishment by whatever means necessary. His old high school idea of anti-establishment is still reality. Now remember this when we get to Bannon's time as Trump's White House chief strategist. At the same time, Bannon was still operating business. In 2006, He convinced Goldman Sachs, his old company he worked for, to put money into a company called Internet Game Entertainment. After the company got hit with a lawsuit, it rebranded as Affinity Media, and Bannon stepped in it to run it. From 2007 to 2011, he was the CEO and chairman. Around that period, his thinking was getting more extreme and more public. In 2007, he wrote an outline for a documentary calling Destroying the Great Satan, arguing that major institutions like the media, government agencies, and even parts of civil society were unintentionally helping extremist groups. Bannon, Breitbart, and the shift from culture to politics. So by the early 2010s, Steve Bannon was no longer just a conservative filmmaker circling Hollywood. He was positioning himself inside something much bigger. In 2011, the conservative media world was buzzing around a possible Sarah Palin presidential run, the Alaskan Republican governor. And Bannon was right there helping push her image as a populist counterweight to the political establishment. However, she would decide against running for president, but that stab at helping someone build a platform was all he needed to get the attention of Andrew Breitbart. So Breitbart, this guy was chaos, loud, impulsive, unfiltered. He said whatever came into his head. Consequences be damned. Breitbart thrived on confrontation and outrage, and he didn't bother polishing his edges. Bannon was the opposite. Button up, book smart, soon tied. Where Breitbart supplied raw energy, Bannon supplied structure, ideology, and long-term strategy. Together, they were dangerous. Around this time, both men became increasingly focused on jihadist Islam and extremism, thing and theme in many of his videos, The Beast. This framing Islam as an existential threat, the West under siege, became a central narrative engine. Bannon was already tied to Breitbart News by this point. In fact, he had been a founding board member back in 2007 when the site was still forming its identity. But the real transformation came after he brought in serious money. After becoming close with billion hedge fund family, the Mercers, Bannon helped convince them to pour around $10 million into Breitbart. That funding changed everything. Breitbart started being a scrappy outlet and became the political weapon. Then in March 2012, the unexpected happened. Andrew Breitbart suddenly died. And who took over? Steve Bannon. Bannon became executive chairman of Breitbart News, and the shift was immediate. You could tell by all the articles and the style. The site moved away from the Hollywood-style conservative outrage and towards full-blown populist politics, nationalism, immigration panic, the idea that people were under attack by corrupt elites. Breitbart's tone hardened, becoming more openly aligned with what would later be called the alt-right. Inside Breitbart, the tension exploded. Former editor Ben Shapiro later accused Bannon of betraying Andrew Breitbart's original mission, calling him a bully who sold out the company to back another bully, Donald Trump. So this is Shapiro before he became a Trump supporter.
And people, a lot of folks know this, but a lot of folks don't. Steve Bannon was down there working for Breitbart at the time. You guys got along initially?
I know.
Even in the beginning.
Steve is not the easiest person to get along with. I will say that.
We'll talk a little bit more, just briefly. I don't want to over-index with Steve, but
this is also where Stephen Miller enters the picture. And remember his name because a Miss Miller text is going to be a major focus when I get to his ties to Epstein. In 2013, Miller, then a Senate staffer only 26 years old, was working for Jeff Sessions, who was connected to Steve Bannon. Immigration reform had just collapsed under Obama, and Miller was furious. Breitbart became the megaphone for that anger. Miller fed stories, Bannon amplified them. Together, they helped turn immigration from a policy debate into a cultural fault line. This was the moment the transformation was complete, because now it rolled straight into his time with Trump. By 2012 to 2014, something quiet but something important was happening behind the scenes. Trump, still a celebrity businessman, was flirting with politics and was reportedly reading a lot of Breitbart news. Breitbart wasn't polite conservatism though. It was war rhetoric, and many of you know that from what I explained. And at the center of Breitbart was Steve Bannon. So Trump and Bannon were a natural match. Both styled themselves as anti-establishment wrecking balls, which you saw in policy. The idea almost was this domination tactic: destroy your enemies, control the narrative, never apologize and hit back twice as hard as when you're attacked. When Trump launched his campaign in 2015, immigration became the fault line. He hammered illegal immigration under the Obama administration, who was also known as the border czar king at the time, which is strange, arguing the border was out of control and the system was broken. Critics immediately labeled him as anti-immigrant. Supporters said he was saying what others were afraid to. By mid-2015, Bannon was effectively running Trump's campaign strategy, a role that was later formalized and confirmed through internal communications and reporting. So when Trump won, he then gave Bannon an official position, which was White House chief strategist and senior counselor, one of the most powerful unelected roles in modern presidential history. Once inside the White House, Bannon's reach was enormous. He had direct access to the president, sat in on nearly every meeting, and was looped into intelligence, national security, and political strategy. He heard everything. This led to a perception mocked endlessly by Saturday Night Live, where they essentially just dressed up Bannon as the Grim Reaper who is dead, and they assumed that he was the real power and Trump was just the front man. That perception wasn't entirely baseless, though. After the Access Hollywood tape grabbed them by the, many believed Trump's campaign was finished. According to multiple accounts, it was Bannon who advised Trump to counterattack, not retreat. And you know what he did? The strategy was bring forward Bill Clinton's accusers and shift the spotlight, turn the scandal into an all-out political brawl aimed directly at Hillary Clinton, who was running against. And it worked. Trump somehow survived what should have been a campaign-ending moment. Inside the admin, Jared Kushner clashed with Bannon, apparently, and this started the beginning of the end of the relationship between Trump and Bannon. First, Bannon was removed from the National Security Council. Then his influence shrank meeting by meeting. After just 7 months, even Trump was saying his role was not as big as it's perceived, which obviously left him isolated, furious, and convinced his revolution had been stolen. But by then, the damage in the blueprint was already in place. And Bannon, he wasn't done. From the White House to the dock, when Steve Bannon left the White House in August 27, it was expected from all the internal memos the White House was reporting out. Almost immediately, Bannon reemerged as a media and political operator outside government. He launched and expanded his War Room podcast, which became a daily megaphone to millions of super MAGA fans. And from there, he positioned himself as the ideological general of the MAGA movement, no longer constrained by laws, ethics rules, or eternal White House checks. Between 2017 and 2019, Bannon was constantly moving, running War Room, traveling internationally to support populist movement, meeting donors, financiers, foreigners, and as reported, later revealed, meeting repeatedly with Jeffrey Epstein during this time, which we will get to. By 2018, Bannon had also got into business with Gu Wengi. He was a fugitive tycoon accused of running influence and disinformation operations. Some would even say blackmail. Their partnership centered around media ventures like G News, which US investigators later described as part of a sprawling propaganda ecosystem. Cambridge Analytica, maybe? That relationship becomes crucial in 2020 because on August 20th, 2020, Steve Bannon was arrested by federal agents, not in a home, but on Gu Wengi's luxury yacht anchored off the coast of Connecticut. The charge, wire fraud and conspiracy related to a charity called We Build the Wall. So prosecutors allege that while donors were told their money would go directly to building a border wall, Bannon and others secretly diverted funds for personal use. Oh, corruption, something so new in politics. Court filings stated that Bannon personally siphoned roughly $1 million through nonprofit entities and shell arrangements. I guess the Seinfeld money was running dry. Before the case could go to trial, Trump pardoned Bannon in January 2021, the guy who fired him. It was one of Trump's final acts in office. The pardon erased federal criminal liability, but it did not erase the judge's findings or the underlying allegations. By that point, Bannon's image had shifted dramatically from White House power broker to media agitator and continuing the anti-establishment rhetoric and populism. So even though he got away with that, guess what? In the lead up to the January 6, 2021 event, Bannon was no longer inside government. And on his podcast, The War Room, Bannon repeatedly pushed claims that the 2020 election was stolen, and to this day claims that. On January 5th, the night before the Capitol attack, he made a now infamous statement warning listeners that, quote, all hell is going to break loose tomorrow, unquote. The next day, it did. While Bannon was not physically inside the Capitol, the January 6th committee later determined that he had advanced knowledge of efforts to disrupt the certification of the election. Subpoenas indicated that Bannon had participated in planning, discussions, and had relevant communications. So when Congress subpoenaed him for testimony and documents, Bannon refused outright. So in November 2021, he was indicted for contempt of Congress, not for what he believed, but refusing to cooperate at all. He didn't want to help with anything. Prosecutors argued that no citizen, regardless of political influence, can simply ignore a lawful subpoena. So in 2022, a jury convicted Bannon on 2 counts of contempt. And in 2024, he was sentenced to 4 months in federal prison because he refused to speak or talk about what happened that fateful day. So here's the part of the video you all probably came for. So within months of being fired, Bannon is allegedly in contact with Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, reports from Epstein's Paris butler claim they came across as close friends in 2018 when he was visiting Epstein. In the article, it says he drove him from the airport to his apartment. When Bannon and Epstein began meeting between 2017 to 2018, it seems, according to reporting synthesized by True Hoop, Henry Abbott, shout out to him, Business Insider, The Guardian, and later confirmed through documents releases and Michael Wolff's reporting, Bannon really began visiting Epstein in late 2017 into 2018, most often at Epstein's Upper East Side Manhattan townhouse, right after his time as Trump's chief strategist. And he's also visiting him in Paris, so it's not just one place. So from all accounts, it seems as soon as Bannon is removed from the White House, he's then caught by reporters spending a lot of time in New York City, as the timeline shows. So here's the full timeline of their communications and what they said. And let me tell you, just listen to all the messages and connect the dots. You tell me what you think, and please let me know in the comments, because to me, it's awfully strange. So according to text messages released by the White House Oversight Committee, Epstein served as a behind-the-scenes advisor to Bannon during a 6-day stretch from August 17th to August 23rd, 2018, actively coaching him on media appearances, messaging, and political strategy. And many of you are shocked because you think it's the other way around, and it is. But in this case, Epstein was helping Bannon. The messages begin on August 17 as Bannon finishes a live television appearance with MSNBC. Epstein is watching in real time. The first text message goes, "How did it go?" Epstein texts as the interview ends. He follows up immediately, "I took off early so I could land in time to watch. All good?" Bannon replies, "The interview ran long. They went for an hour instead of 30 minutes, showing the entire hour over multiple platforms." Epstein responds, "Attaboy." The conversation turns personal and revealing. Epstein jokes, "You looked so clean cut next to him. I thought I turned on the figure skating channel by accident." Bannon fires back, "My come hither look." Epstein replies, "Better than the usual come Hitler look." Bannon responds simply, "Ouch." Bannon explains that he prepared carefully, wanting to look clean, not sloppy, for what he calls the, quote, soy boy network. That's just hilarious. Epstein replies, "Closer to toy boy," with the winky face emoji. Then Epstein shifts from banner to production notes, offering detailed advice on Bannon's on-camera presentation. He critiques the final moments of the interview, writing, "Last 10 minutes, more the real you." He then gives staging advice. "Your eye is the best, so important for you to watch the play reel. Over the shoulder for him, 3/4 for you, lightning hot for you, chairs 2, restrictive for you." This isn't casual feedback. Epstein is acting like a media producer and coaching Bannon instead of the other way around. Over the following days, Epstein becomes deeply involved in shaping Bannon's political and messaging, especially on Trump's economic agenda. Epstein drafts responses to criticism of Trump's tax cuts. And at the same time, Epstein is venting about his own growing problems. And on August 22nd, he texts Bannon, "FYI, there's a guy totally nuts out of jail after 20 years that has been saying letters RE to me to all agencies, stalking, etc. Wants $1 billion. No real threat, just one more pain." He adds a name, Stephen Hoffenberger. Now, if you remember my video on Adnan Khashoggi, I go deep into Stephen Hoffenberger. Hoffenberg was Epstein's former business associate in a massive Ponzi scheme and had publicly accused Epstein of deep financial crimes. The messages also show Epstein and Bannon discussing figures inside Trump's orbit. On August 18th, Epstein texts, "Message, I'm back Wednesday. Thiel coming." Yes, that Peter Thiel of Palantir. Let that sit. 3 days later, he lays out priorities. Peter Thiel in town. He also mentions Anthony Scaramucci, writing, "The mooch still in contact with Ivanka," I'm guessing in regards to Ivanka Trump, has reached out to me and asked how he can re-engage with you, i.e. Bannon. The two men react in real time to unfolding scandals about Trump. August 23rd, when news breaks that National Enquirer publisher David Pecker has received immunity in the Michael Cohen case, Epstein's text, Pecker immunity, one more drop. Bannon replies instantly, huge event, huge. He follows with more women payoffs coming. That same day, the messages turned explicitly secret. Epstein texts Bannon, by the way, I'm in New York tonight through Saturday if you want to visit under the cover of darkness or breakfast tomorrow if you like. This doesn't sound good. Bannon responds, do you have access that's not the front door? They have 24/7 surveillance on you. So everyone knows Epstein's bad news, but the messages come across as if Bannon doesn't care, and he knows this. Epstein replies, I'm happy to come see you if better. He adds, separate from the process server that left yesterday or the early morning doorman next door. He then offers location, can meet at 301 East 66 if you prefer. I'll send the apartment number. So that's his New York City townhouse, which Julian took me to, and I will say it is straight creepy. You could feel the bad omens, and it's also crazy to find out zero media outlets have ever questioned Bannon about this. Bannon replies, I don't like the Regency as it's totally wired. Epstein reassures him, there's also a rear entrance on 67 if you prefer. He adds, super secure. Then someone can meet you and take you in. Bannon responds, just set a time. I'll be in after 4:30. So this is verbatim record released by Congress and reported by The Guardian. The relationship doesn't end there, and this is only messages from what is publicly available now. But the messages take a very dark turn. On June 24, 2018, Epstein texts Bannon a message referencing both Trump and Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew and Trump today. Too funny. Recall Prince Andrew's accuser came out of Mar-a-Lago. Bannon responded, can't believe nobody is making you the connective tissue. These are all messages between Epstein and Bannon, which just shows you how close of a relationship they had. Because in late September 2018, during Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing, Epstein and Bannon exchanged texts about how to handle allegations against Christine Blasey Ford. Epstein wrote to Bannon something along the lines of, make sure they ask Ford about her medications. My guess is that Katz won't let her answer. Bannon replied, Roger. So he's feeding information to Bannon to manipulate the public perceptions of these things. In one thread, Epstein and others diss Trump as, quote, the worst negotiator in human history, unquote. That's what Epstein said. And to top it off, these new messages released here may be the confirmation of the worst. Jeffrey Epstein and Steve Bannon are no longer spelling things out. It's a friendly back and forth like I would have with a friend of mine. And it almost sounds like they're purposely speaking in code in these messages. Epstein keeps telling Bannon to focus on Miller, never explaining who that is, never clarifying what that means. Maybe it's Stephen Miller's wife. Epstein explicitly states Bannon can use the island or his Palm Beach house anytime. They're the exact location tied to Epstein's past. The same properties named again and again by victims, investigators, and court records. And Bannon doesn't recoil. He doesn't question it. He thanks him, calls him, quote, brother. Epstein makes a point to say the invitation is sincere, that it's rare, that it's special, and all of it is wrapped in this unsettling, half-spoken language. The kind that avoids saying too much because both sides, I guess, already understand what's being discussed and what may happen. The coded nature of these messages feel deliberate. There is no public proof that Steve Bannon took part in Epstein's crimes. But when a convicted sex offender that's already public, even at the time in 2018, offers privacy on his island, and the response is comfort instead of alarm, it forces an uncomfortable question. Was Steve Bannon involved? But the Bannon and Epstein relationship gets worse. If we put on our tinfoil hats and look at the Epstein timelines, one timeline that is so suspiciously off is this email exchange on June 28th, 2019 between Epstein and Bannon. In it, you can see Bannon writing, quote, now you can understand why Trump wakes up in the middle of the night when he hears you and I are friends. End quote. Now, to be clear, we are making some crazy assumptions here, but at this time, everyone knows Epstein's got a checkered history with young girls. It's all reported. Trump and Epstein were briefly friends. Trump allegedly cut him off, and Bannon's been there for most of it, it seems. But here's the creepiest part. Just 8 days later, on July 6, 2019, Epstein is arrested after arriving back from Paris, France at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. Coincidence? just calling a spade, it is strange how leading up to Epstein's death, he was starting to leak things between him and Trump, and Bannon was being fully aware of this, coming off his friend from the White House. It just seems so suspicious just to brush off. You just have to call it what it is. And it gets even weirder because Epstein's only brother, who I did a video on, which you should go check out, which he has some of the coldest takes I've ever heard, was not privy to the 15 hours of documentary footage that Bannon's collected on Epstein. Even to this day, he still hasn't seen it. A recently released House Democrat email suggests he watched a version of a mock-up interview of Jeffrey Epstein and Steve Bannon on a YouTube link, and then after trying to watch it again a few weeks later, the link was gone. Bannon apparently called it, quote, witness preparation, and it said it was protected under attorney-client confidentiality, even though Steve Bannon is not a lawyer. So how does that make any sense? And keeping it from his last living relative? Plus, Mark Epstein knew that Bannon was trying to help Jeffrey rehabilitate his reputation. The interview footage might not have anything we already know, and that's whatever, but to keep it from Epstein's only living relative, his brother, what are on those interview tapes, and what can his brother not be allowed to watch? And for those who don't know, Epstein's brother doesn't believe Jeffrey Epstein would blackmail anyone. Yes, probably the coldest take ever taken on this thing. Bannon asked Mark, though, for $6 million to make the alleged documentary, which Mark apparently said no to. So anyways, the behind the scenes taking place do only one thing to the average citizen once they process this information. It confuses everybody, and it almost feels deliberate. And what's the word I've been using to describe Steve Bannon as? The ultimate redirection artist. And here's another tinfoil hat moment, probably the wildest, which I don't know what to think, but I'm gonna share it with you guys since it comes from one of Epstein's most prominent victims, Maria Farmer. Maria Farmer was interviewed, and she goes as far to say that Epstein's inner circle were all like, quote, Jewish supremacy, unquote. People who think they are better than anyone. So just watch this clip.
I wasn't allowed to go get food. And when I called Ghislaine and asked why I couldn't eat there, she said, it's a Jewish country club. You're not Jewish. They're not going to serve you. This is how this woman spoke to me. Yeah, this is how these people think, Whitney. They, honest to God, think their DNA is better than everybody else's. I swear to you. It was a theme all the time with them. With Eileen Guggenheim, with, Jeffrey Epstein, with Ghislaine. It was a theme. Jeffrey was a lot less horrible than Ghislaine as far as a human being, like just being around, because she was raping just as many children.
So the country club, you weren't allowed to go because it was only for, people of a certain religion
Jewish
and
people.
Ethnicity. Okay, so
Religious.
that's unfortunate.
I mean, they could cut you down, and it was so morally devastating. You just felt useless as a human being when you were told you're nothing because you're not Jewish, you're stupid, you're useless, a useless white girl, a poor little peasant. Just the things that I was called, I was just like, I believed it, because it was like a cult, the problem. Yeah, you wouldn't believe the way Jeffrey and Ghislaine spoke about African Americans. It was like, it made my skin crawl. Anybody who was not Jewish, and you can write about this, but the way they spoke about them, it was really horrifying. And it showed me a great deal about how these people truly believe that they're chosen to do something here. I don't know. It's unbelievable to me. And it was every one of them, the way they spoke. And one time I heard Isabel say to her mother, Eileen, Mommy, why do you call Maria a nobody? And she said, honey, Isabel, Maria is not a Jew. She is a nobody.
Well, it is worth
so you
pointing,
can see why for about 20 years.
That type of stuff I might actually include just because the Maxwell family has
you
ties
should include
to this
it.
group
You should include it.
What's it called? Chabad Lubavitch. And group openly talks about how only Jews are human and the rest of human beings are like cattle, basically.
So apparently she was called, quote, you're nothing since you're not Jewish, useless white girl, poor little peasant. She describes it as a cult. They had this weird Jewish supremacy complex, she says, and they had this idea that they were the chosen people, almost like it says in the Torah. Now, what does this have to do with Steve Bannon? Well, he allegedly only trusted Jewish people for many things, and some people have accused him as going as far to say that Ashkenazi Jews are supreme to everyone else, and everyone else are peasants. Now, these are just straight allegations that need further investigation, but in the context of this video, it would be a disservice if I didn't mention it or show it, since so much of this is built on Epstein's alleged intel background that are tied to Mossad. So thank you all for watching. This one was a lot, but one thing is for certain after this, you can't really trust anyone. Everyone's gonna fail you, everyone's gonna let you down, and that might sound sad, but there's one person who will never let you down, and that's my faith in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So I'm gonna dive deeper in my daily Bible readings and trust the Lord's plan, because something like this can be very dark and hard to get out of the hole, but it's important. Also, I'm gonna continue to investigate the story of Steve Bannon and Epstein, because I really have a hard time believing the first time they met, which is only publicly available we know, was in 2017 late. That's what we know, but the way Bannon operates and Epstein operates, it screams intel operation. I'm just gonna say it, but I don't have proof, so that's just my opinion. So anyways, thanks for watching. We are on the road to 100,000 subscribers this year. So if you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button, like and comment. My name is Alessi, and I'll see you in the next one.